You hear the word tariff all the time, right? It's thrown around constantly in the news and big political debates, but what does it actually mean? How do they really work? And more importantly, who ends up paying the price? Well, let's break it all down.
So here's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to start with a super simple definition, then we'll look at the different types of tariffs. After that, we'll weigh the pros and the cons, and then really dig into whether they actually achieve their goals with some pretty fascinating real-world examples.
All right, first things first. Before we can get into the heated debates, we need to have a crystal clear idea of what a tariff actually is. At its heart, that's really all it is. It's just a tax on stuff that's imported. But why would a government do that? The best way to understand the why behind it all is with a simple analogy. Let's talk about bread.
Okay, so imagine a local American bakery. They sell a nice loaf of bread for $3. Simple enough, right? They're employing local people, they're part of a community.
Now, here comes the competition. A company over in China can make a pretty similar loaf and ship it all the way to the U.S. for just $1. Now, if you're the shopper, which one are you probably going to buy? This is a huge, huge problem for that American bakery. They just can't compete with that price. So, to protect its local businesses, the U.S. government steps in. It puts a $3 tariff on every single loaf of that imported Chinese bread. And just like that, the whole equation changes. That $1 Chinese loaf now has a $3 tax on it, so its new price on the shelf is $4. All of a sudden, the $3 American bread is the cheaper option. And that, right there, illustrates the fundamental goal of a tariff, to make your own country's products more competitive. But how is this tax actually applied? Well, it turns out there are a couple of different ways to do it. It's not always a flat fee like we saw with our bread example. You've got two main types. The first is a specific tariff. That's the fixed fee we just talked about, $3 per loaf. Doesn't matter if the loaf is fancy or plain. But the one you hear about most in the news is the ad valorem tariff, and that's just a fancy Latin term for a percentage. So a 20% tariff on a $10 loaf of bread is a $2 tax, but on a $100 loaf, it's a $20 tax. It scales up with the value of the item. Okay, so this brings up the big question. Are tariffs a good thing or a bad thing? Well, like with pretty much everything in economics, the answer is it's complicated. They have some really clear intended benefits, but they also come with some seriously messy potential downsides. On the pro side, the classic argument is that they protect our local businesses and jobs from getting wiped out by cheaper foreign competition. They also bring in tax money for the government, which is always a plus. And sometimes they're used as a bargaining chip, a political tool to pressure other countries to the negotiation table. Let's look at a really powerful real-world example of this. Back in the early 1980s, the iconic American company Harley-Davidson was basically on the verge of going out of business. Why? Cheaper, really high-quality Japanese motorcycles had just flooded the market, and Harley's near-total market dominance had collapsed to just 15%.
So in response, the U.S. government threw them a lifeline. A massive 45% tariff was slapped on imported heavy motorcycles. The idea wasn't for this to be permanent, but to give Harley some breathing room, a chance to get back on its feet.
And you know what? It worked. It totally worked. The tariff gave the company time to restructure, to modernize its factories, and to seriously improve its quality. By 1987, just 4 years later, Harley was so competitive again that it actually went to the government and asked them to remove the tariff. It's a textbook case of a tariff doing exactly what it was supposed to do.
But it is not always a success story, not even close. On the con side, tariffs almost always mean you and I pay higher prices for things. They can also really hurt local businesses that depend on imported materials or parts. And this is a big one. They can seriously damage relationships between countries, often kicking off a tit-for-tat cycle we call a trade war. So that brings us to the million-dollar question. Do tariffs actually work? To really understand the chain reaction they can set off, let's use a super simple story. Imagine two countries. You've got Cookie Land, and they make the world's most amazing chocolate chip cookies. And then you have Pie Land, and their pies are just incredible. They trade with each other happily, and everybody gets the best of both worlds. Life is good. But one day, the government of Cookie Land gets worried. Their local pie makers are struggling. So, to help them out, they slap a big tariff on all pies being imported from Pie Land. Now, at first, this looks like a great move for Cookie Land. Its pie industry is saved, but this is where the story takes a turn. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, Pie Land is not happy.
Not at all. They see their pie sales to Cookie Land just plummet. So they strike back. They hit Cookie Land with what's called a reciprocal tariff, a retaliatory tax on their famous cookies.
And here's the crucial point. Nobody wins. Now, people in both countries have to pay more for the pies and cookies they love. Small businesses, like cafes in Cookie Land, that serve those amazing pies, start to struggle. The cookie exporters in Cookie Land lose a huge chunk of their business. In the end, it's just a classic lose-lose situation.
Okay, so that's a cute little story, but does it actually play out that way in the real world? Let's take a look at a couple of real case studies to see who the actual winners and losers are. Sometimes tariffs can work. You look at South Korea back in the 60s and 70s. They used high tariffs to shield their brand new car industry, and it worked. It forced companies like Hyundai and Kia to innovate like crazy, and they used smart diplomacy to avoid getting into a trade war. But then you have the recent U.S. China trade war, which backfired spectacularly because both sides did exactly what Cookie Land and Pie Land did.
And the cost? It was enormous. One study from Moody's Analytics estimated that the trade war led to a loss of around 300,000 jobs right here in the U.S. and slowed down economic growth. Both American consumers and Chinese businesses got hit hard. This all leads to a really fascinating question. If both the United States and China got hurt in this conflict, did anyone actually come out ahead? Was there a winner? The answer is kind of surprising. Vietnam. As companies were desperately scrambling to find a way around these new tariffs on goods made in China, a lot of them just moved their factories and supply chains. And a primary beneficiary of that move was Vietnam, which saw its exports to the U.S. absolutely skyrocket. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, while tariffs can sometimes act like a precision surgical tool, like with Harley-Davidson, protecting a key industry at a critical moment, it seems like they more often act like a blunt instrument, causing all sorts of unpredictable damage. And it leaves us with this final question. In an economy that's as globally connected as ours, is it even possible to target just one country without accidentally creating a whole bunch of unintended winners and losers all over the world?